I'd like to talk about the Latin term in medias res, which means into the middle of things. Epic poems always begin in medias res, right in the middle of things. Homer, who wrote the Odyssey, first developed this technique. Virgil, as he writes the Aeneid, uses the technique to begin his epic poem, the Aeneid. As we saw in the film introducing us to Virgil's Aeneid, we know that he was patterning his epic poem about the founding of Rome after Homer's epic poems, the Odyssey and the Iliad. In the modern world, we tend to not use the term in medias res so much when we speak about modern literature or modern film. Instead, we'll use the term flashback. So in medias res is like a flashback. But what makes it especially attention-grabbing for the author of an epic poem is that the author uses the flashback technique right at the very beginning of the story. The reason that I have the phrase in medias res on this map, which is a map of the Mediterranean world during Aeneas's lifetime, is to show you the journey that Aeneas takes when he leaves Troy and eventually ends up in Italy, specifically at the place called Latium. You'll notice that the path is very windy, circuitous. He goes in a lot of different directions and doesn't take a straight line to Latium. In the video that we watched earlier, we learned that he spent quite a bit of time in this place called Carthage, which was the great rival of the Romans. As Virgil's epic poem opens, we find his title character, Aeneas, already in Carthage. Now, if you look at the path of Aeneas's journey, Carthage is almost at the very end of his journey. It definitely doesn't begin there. He didn't go from Troy straight to Carthage. There were a lot of things that happened from the time that he left Troy to the time that he ended up in Carthage. Each one of these little pit stops in Thrace, in Delos, on Crete, through the Strophaeades, up into the Ionian Sea, north of Greece in Buthrotum, down to Sicily, and then around the coast of Sicily, are all places that he stops at before he gets to Carthage. And yet, when Aeneas' story begins, Virgil begins in Carthage with Queen Dido, who invites this stranger who's landed on her coast to dinner. And when he's at dinner, she asks who he is. And she knows his name because she's familiar with the events that have taken place. She understands that he's a hero of the Trojan War. And she asks him to tell his story and wonders why he's ended up here in Africa. And that's when Aeneas speaks in a flashback to tell Dido everything that has happened from the time that he left Troy until the time that he reached her shore. This takes place over several books in Virgil's Aeneid. It is the technique in medias res. Virgil begins his story right in the middle of things, where Aeneas is in Carthage telling his story to Queen Dido. In a flashback, he'll relate how he left Troy and what happened in all of these places that he ended up stopping at. When the story continues, we'll be in real time at Carthage, and we'll learn about the story of Dido and Aeneas. But the story that you're getting to read is called In Medias Res, because we are going to be in Carthage. We will have Dido and Aeneas dining together, and we will hear Aeneas tell Dido the beginning of his story about his escape from Troy.